Thanks for tuning in to more fantasy football talk on the Ourlads Football Network, OFN Dynasty with Rotowire.com. That means John McKechnie is joining me once again. And John, the first week is in the books. We actually have standings and player stats to discuss in the first week of the waiver wire.
Yeah, it's week one. As my colleagues Jeff Erickson and Chris List were talking about on the Rotowire NFL pod yesterday. Week one has a great way of kind of disabusing you of what your preseason notions were, and you can kind of get a sense of where you were right and where you were wrong pretty early on. Obviously, week one, things are going to change. Injuries are going to crop up. Players will make their ways up and down depth charts, but there's a handful of players that I know we'll get to that certainly had kind of standout performances relative to expectations. So I'm excited to get into this. There's a lot going on in week one,
and it's interesting because, and Dynasty especially, we watch NFL, and I think one of the best things that we talk about now are the overreactions in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And the overreactions are just the same way with fantasy football, and especially even with Dynasty, because this is the long run. You can start to get a little nervous with your year-to-year leagues, but Dynasty, just like the NFL, you don't get too carried away, especially with matchups. We saw last night, Darren Waller had like over 20 targets. Now, you can't tell me that the Raiders are going into strategy for the entire season, trying to get Waller the ball 25 times every game. That's just not going to happen. So certain players, receivers, running backs are not going to be used a certain way from week to week. And I think that means you probably have to wait at least a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks at the earliest, maybe even a month at the latest. But that's the window where you can kind of really get a good idea of how your players are being utilized.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, when you view this all through the Dynasty lens, and obviously Dynasty, you have players that are younger in their careers that tend to carry more value. But as of where they are right this moment on their given teams, it might be a little bit different. I think Trey Sermon's a great example of that. He's someone that went fairly high in our draft. He was obviously a third round selection in this year's draft. Surprise game day, healthy and active. So that for the Sermon, for the managers out there that have Sermon, it's fair to be a little bit concerned, but I think things are a little bit different now, having Mostert go down for the year with that knee injury. So we figured that he won't be a healthy scratch again. That they will need him, but now it becomes a question of how much does he force his way into the role, or is it going to be someone like an Elijah Mitchell that ends up kind of being that bell cow for what is one of the more attractive run games out there to target for fantasy.
And in our league, Ryan Pohl already has Elijah Mitchell, so he's gone. But depending on what kind of league you're in, he's got to be at the top of the list as far as that's who everybody wants this week if he's available. Correct?
Yes, he'll be the number one most added player this week. If you play in a league where there's free agent budgets to acquire your waivers, he will be someone that's commanding over 60% of people's budgets, and that might even be a conservative estimate, especially in light of that Mostert news. We didn't know as of yesterday, but as of today, now we know for sure that path is cleared and Mostert is out of the picture. It would have been interesting to see how those bids would have been processed had the Mostert news about him being out for the season broken, say, tomorrow or post most leagues running their waivers.
Now, sticking with the running back situation, we see here that Mark Ingram, now it's 1 week, but he got an awful lot of carries compared to Lindsey and Johnson with Houston. So what does that mean? And he's available in our league. So is it again one of those situations where it's a matchup? Is Lindsey going to get the most carries in week 2? Will Johnson get the most carries in week 3? I think we definitely need to see a little bit more action before we're for sure that Mark Ingram is going to be the number 1 running back there. But he's still intriguing, I guess, considering his history and if he could stay healthy, and he's available in our league.
Right, exactly. So, that there's a lot of things to weigh out there because they do have that just litany of established vets between Ingram, Lindsey, and David Johnson. So that it feels like it could go to the hot hand any given week. We don't really know what to make of the tendencies of this Houston offense just yet. And then, there's the other added element of Houston getting to play against Jacksonville this past week, and Jacksonville being even worse than we expected. I don't think anyone was really backing Houston going into that game. I play in a Survivor League. Someone went with Jacksonville, in fact. So that goes to show you that how low the opinion on Houston has been. So I don't know if there's still much to take away from them beating Jacksonville. And I think it's also important to note that Ingram getting 26 carries had a lot to do with the game flow. I mean, obviously, Houston up big for a lot of that game. Of course, they're going to lean on the ground game a little bit more in that situation. That's not going to be the case most weeks. I think they're going to be playing from behind much more often than not. You got Cleveland, Carolina, Buffalo, New England coming up for Houston. I think that those are all penciled in losses. But again, we thought it was a penciled in loss against Jacksonville. But either way, it's all a roundabout way of saying that if you're in that win now window for Dynasty and say you've had some attrition at running back, which is very, very possible. We've obviously gone over Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, Travis Etienne from the offseason, and then Gus Edwards, of course, going down with his knee injury last week. There's just a lot of teams that are probably hurting at running back. Mostert, in my case, and Dobbins actually. So I am hurting at running back. So Ingram, it's not sexy. It's not a pretty pickup at this stage of his career. He's averaging under 4 yards a carry on Sunday against the Jags, but sometimes you just got to hold your nose and chase the volume.
Well, just taking a look at some of the free agents who are available in our league, and one guy does stand out for me that I wanted to talk about, and that's Patterson, because we know that Arthur Smith wants to run the football, and I was actually impressed with Patterson running the football. I haven't seen him run the football that good ever as a running back. And so, look, Davis is the number 1. He's not going to, you don't really look at him as a guy that's going to get, 25, 30 carries a game, not the Travis and
Sure.
the Derrick Henry type. He's got the speed. He can return kickoffs. So it's not the worst idea in the world to take a look at a guy like Cordarrelle Patterson. I think people probably just normally, like I think even I felt before the season began. But I watched and he impressed me early in that game. Now Atlanta didn't impress me, but he did. I don't think he's the worst idea in the world.
No, I don't either. I think that a lot of people were speculating on what that second running back in Atlanta was going to shape out to be during the offseason. I think Javian Hawkins, over the summer, that this obviously changed over the course of training camp and everything. But Javian Hawkins was someone that people would throw a late round draft selection on, just kind of as a hedge against Mike Davis, because Mike Davis suddenly just kind of had the golden opportunity fall into his lap with McCaffrey going out last season. It's not that he's some generational talent. He just kind of was a replacement level back that got to have that volume that made him extremely fantasy relevant. So Davis, he still remains that number 1 guy, but Patterson, definitely an interesting guy. I mean, I remember a few years ago when he was in New England, it was like a Sunday night game and they started using him in the run game. And it's like, maybe this is what he should be doing. Maybe this is the way to get Patterson involved in your offense. So it feels like he's at least locking down that number 2 spot there. I don't think Wayne Gallman is much of a player. So at this stage, I could definitely see Patterson moving into a role where he does become relevant in these deeper leagues or these dynasty type of leagues.
What do you think about Kenneth Gainwell with the Eagles? He looks like he's now potentially the number 2 running back there.
What's great about Gainwell is when it comes to this particular team context is that Miles Sanders proved last year to be a liability in the passing game. And Gainwell, that is his strong suit. We saw him at Memphis average 10 yards a target in his 1 year as the starter there. That's rare type of efficiency and production from a running back. So he's obviously able to do that. He was targeted 3 times on Sunday, just caught 2 of them for 6 yards. So nothing really crazy there necessarily, but we can point back to his production in college and feel confident that he's a guy that can contribute in the passing game. And the question coming in was really, is it going to be Gainwell or is it going to be Boston Scott as that next guy up behind Sanders? And I think the signs are pointing to Gainwell being that guy. And sometimes they use multiple running backs in the backfield just with the nature of that offense there in Philly. You got, Jalen Hurts there as well, who's a run threat. So you can really put some pressure on the defense by having some, kind of a loaded full house in the backfield there. So I like what Gainwell brings to the table. I always liked him as a prospect. I don't know if he's going to be a great every down runner, and I think Sanders can still take on a good bit of that role. It's not like he's going away, but I think Gainwell, just with his skill set, is someone to keep an eye on and monitor. Absolutely.
And speaking of receivers out of the backfield, not a surprise that Jamal Williams got a ton of catches. Just as Swift, they both had their share of touches out of the backfield. I think that's what we're going to see all season.
In Detroit, I could definitely see that. I think that Swift is obviously the more talented guy between the two, but Williams has his own, positive attributes. And I think that there's also something to be said for Swift just not being the most durable guy in the world. So it would not be surprising to see Detroit keep him on something of a pitch count, not necessarily completely limiting him, but they went out and got Jamal Williams in free agency for a reason. And I think that they're going to go ahead and continue to utilize him. So I think that we're going to see Williams be kind of like a relatively low ceiling, but for as far as like a flex consideration, a decent floor he gives you.
Okay, now a couple more at running back. Zack Moss, big surprise that he wasn't even active. And I don't know what that's about. And I really thought going into the preseason that there was a chance, based on how poorly Singletary played at the end of last season, that Moss was going to take over and be the guy. He had the talent. That did not look like it was going to happen in the preseason because Singletary looked really productive. And sure enough, not only did Singletary come out as the number 1 back on Sunday, but Moss didn't even play. So if you're someone like Jim Coventry, who has Moss, that's got to be pretty disappointing. But good for whoever has Singletary.
Yeah, it's absolutely a concern if you're a Moss investor. I think he was one of the more surprising healthy scratches on Sunday. I think that Buffalo targeting that backfield was a bit of a risky proposition to begin with, just because Buffalo is very, very pass heavy. And then Josh Allen, of course, sucks up a lot of the oxygen as far as the actual carries and the goal line carries. And then so you take that into account, and then you look at the fact that Devin Singletary actually ran pretty well on Sunday, not with a heavy volume, but he still was effective with the carries that he did get. So I'm not sure what the deal is with Moss. If he's a healthy scratch, and that's a where there's smoke, there's fire type of situation. So I'm absolutely concerned if I have Moss shares.
And anybody that has Stevenson for the Patriots, who really, if you think of both situation, I mean, because I have Sony Michel. I have a veteran though, and I understand what they're trying to do in LA. He's got to learn the playbook, so I'm not as worried. But if you draft Stevenson, this might be a longer situation than you thought, because when the Patriots traded Michel, it was almost like, hey, this is our guy, and he looked really good in the preseason. But then Stevenson comes out, fails in pass protection, fumbles the ball right away. He's done for the game. And when you do that at Bill Belichick's team, you may not see the field for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, Bill doesn't take too kindly to those unforced errors, right? So that this could be something that lands Stevenson absolutely in the doghouse. And we've seen time and time again in New England where Belichick just kind of leaves the rookie running backs on the bench. I mean, Damian Harris barely played as a rookie. James White barely played as a rookie. I mean, there's precedent here. And it's disappointing because, like you said, Stevenson was one of those preseason all-stars. I think he led the league in rushing yardage in the preseason. So that maybe that just tells you that to remember to not take too much stock in that preseason rushing production. But I thought that there was a case for him coming into the year just with his build that he could be someone that's an asset near the goal line. But apparently,
Not so far.
Him fumbling, I think, really hurts. I know Damian Harris also had a killer fumble. So, I mean, I think Belichick is just mad at his running back room right now.
Well, I was talking to Evan Lazar, and we do the Patriots show each week. I just recorded it a few hours ago, and he made a really good point, which was Damian Harris is not used to the heavy workload, and that might have contributed to his fumble, which is why the Patriots have got to do something. They have to decide, are we going to trust J.J. Taylor? Are we going to trust Stevenson? And if we don't, then maybe they got to go out and bring in another running back, because Bolden is not that tight. So it'll be interesting to follow the Patriots in the next week or two, and whether or not, okay, we're going to get Stevenson back out there. We believe we have to at this point. We have to trust, sort of like what they did with Ridley a few years back. But we'll wait and see, because that's something to monitor. Running backs are out there, so if the Patriots want to trade for somebody,
you sure the Ravens didn't sign all?
Yeah, I know, right? And we already saw Murray scored a touchdown, right?
That's right.
And then your boy Williams scored a touchdown. Le'Veon Bell hasn't been active yet, so who knows if he ever will be. But I don't think the Ravens lost because of their running back situation necessarily. They scored enough points. They just gave up a bit too much. Okay. Also, there was... I'm trying to see if there was one more before we move on. Yes, and that is Seattle. And with Penny, who's always hurt again. Collins is the next guy up, naturally. But you've heard me say this a few times on the show, and I'm going to say it again. I just think Seattle at some point should give DJ Dallas an opportunity now. He looked great in the preseason. He's a game breaker type of guy, more than Collins. Collins is more that physical running back. This is a perfect opportunity for Collins to get a few more touches now. And if he does, and he actually looks like, wait a second, maybe if we give him even more touches, maybe this is exactly what someone like DJ Dallas needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Collins obviously was away from football for a little bit, comes back, at the end of last season, and looked like he still had a little bit something left in the tank. I believe he was inactive on Sunday. So and DJ Dallas was not. So I think that's a little bit noteworthy. It kind of shows you just a little bit of a check-in as to how the Seahawks might be viewing their backfield pecking order. And now with Penny dinged up, it wouldn't completely shock me. I mean, I think that they're going to have three active running backs on Sunday. I think it will be Carson, Dallas, and Collins. But I think more people just knowing Collins as like a more established guy, they might lean towards valuing him a little bit more in fantasy. Sure. But I think that you make an interesting case when it comes to Dallas.
Okay, quarterback situation. The first guy that gets hurt is Fitzpatrick, and it was like, boom, he's out. And so now I bring this up not because for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now I'm sure Jim Coventry wasn't relying on Ryan Fitzpatrick to win in fantasy football for even for Dynasty this season. Not that he wouldn't have been a good number 2, but Heineke's a young quarterback, and this is his opportunity. And he didn't look all that bad in the playoffs last year. So, okay. I mean, again, this is Dynasty, and he's a young quarterback. I think that you probably wait maybe a week and to see, okay, what does he really look like after at least another start this year? But he's not. He's interesting. I'd keep an eye on him only for Dynasty.
If you have a roster or someone at the bottom of your roster that is droppable, and you need some quarterback depth
at
the very
especially
least.
Youth.
I don't think that you can wait a week personally. I think that Heineke, knowing the nature of Ryan Fitzpatrick's injury, he's got a hip injury. That's obviously something that's going to sideline him for a while. It could very well be the Heineke show here for the next little bit. And what's interesting about him from a fantasy perspective is his mobility that he showed specifically in that game that you alluded to against Tampa Bay in the playoffs, where he had that amazing touchdown run, outran some guys that you would not have thought Taylor Heinicke would have been able to. So he's got that element to his game. I personally thought after that game that Washington could have just tried to roll with him as the starter. I don't blame them for going out and getting a veteran like Fitzpatrick, but I don't think that they should feel too bad about their situation with Heinicke. We'll see how things go here. So it's totally speculative at this point. We've never really seen the keys handed over to him fully in an NFL offense for a whole season or anything. But I think that if you are hurting at quarterback, I don't think you have the luxury of waiting. I think you got to pounce this week.
And the rumors are going to swirl until they're put to bed by Ron Rivera about Cam Newton.
Absolutely.
Because it's just I mean, anybody can just see that. Come on, Ron Rivera, Cam Newton. If he doesn't want to bring Cam Newton in, I think that tells you a lot.
Right. Because, Rivera's a guy who's brought in a lot of his old, former Panther compatriots. So, if he doesn't jump at the chance for Cam, especially in light of this injury, that, like you said, that is very telling.
And then that's, again, this great opportunity for Heinicke. And he was a very productive college quarterback. I think it was Old Dominion or something like that.
Correct.
It was one of those schools that just moved from FCS to FBS. And so a lot of times you never hear of these guys again. So it's great that he's going to get this opportunity. And he definitely looks like, at the very least, a good backup NFL quarterback. Now he's young enough where he gets his chance, and this may be the only chance he's ever going to get. The only other quarterback that I think that is worth talking about, that because he's a free agent only, and then we'll talk about a couple others, but that's Teddy Bridgewater. And there was no doubt about Bridgewater, the fact that he was going to a team that had weapons galore, but could Teddy Bridgewater elevate his game so he could take advantage of those weapons? Been only one game, but so far so good. And he even showed good mobility. I'm still a little bit worried about whether or not he can last 17 games. That's the thing I'd be a little bit concerned with. But he's definitely somebody that if you're looking for a number 2 quarterback in your dynasty league, or heck, even a really solid backup, on your year-to-year league, Teddy Bridgewater should be somebody to look at if he's a free agent, which he is in our league.
No, I think so too. I was faced with the decision last week to scoop him up because I had Cam Newton, so I obviously needed to fix that situation. I ended up going with Jimmy G, and big regret there. Bridgewater, obviously the guy in Denver. I believe he was named a team captain. So I mean, he's going to be that guy until he gets injured or performs really poorly. And I don't really think he's going to perform poorly. It seems like this offense is tailored around what he can do well, and he's got so many talented players around him. I know Jerry Jeudy's hurt now, but still a lot of guys there in Denver. So Bridgewater, if he's still out there, scoop him up. But no real hesitation.
And I'll tell you right now, I'm definitely considering the possibility of putting a waiver claim in our league because of the fact that my number 2 is Matt Ryan. And I'll tell you right now, just watching that game, I think that there's a distinct possibility that Matt Ryan could be done. It's possible. Now, it might be a game. Again, I'm not going to overreact, but he's getting old, and he did not look good. There were moments in that game early that they looked like they needed to. He just looked like he was getting rid of the ball early in some circumstances because he didn't want to get hit. In other circumstances, it just looked like where are you throwing the football? That's a big concern for me. I do have Carson Wentz. He's healthy. He put up decent enough numbers for a number 2 quarterback that I could easily switch, which I will. But Bridgewater is definitely someone that I'll consider to pick him up, no doubt about it. And if you have Matt Ryan, I think you have to be very, very upset and maybe even think of dumping him, which I'm already thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, this is something where we kind of just didn't really examine the possibility of Ryan falling off a cliff. I mean, he is well into his NFL career. You know, he's the first pick in 2008, so it's he's been in the league for a long time. Never been much of a mobile guy, and then you also factor in that Atlanta's offensive line apparently still in shambles. They were getting penalties left and right, like illegal formation.
That was an ugly
It's
game
big,
all around.
yeah. Very yeah, so that was on my main TV down here in Atlanta, and then I had Red Zone going on the other one. So I did watch a lot of that game as well. And Ryan, I mean, that offensive line was getting folded up, and that doesn't get fixed over the course of the season. I don't feel like. I know that Philly can force the issue with that a little bit better than some other teams that Ryan and the Falcons will face, but you got to consider the possibility that Ryan under duress is going to be a thing all year, and clearly that's something that I mean, no NFL quarterback is like great under pressure or anything, but I mean, it feels like it's something that could really send Ryan's numbers just plummeting and really kind of sink the rest of the offense with it.
And see, that's the reason I was upset at Ryan, because they were running the football early. They were effective running the football. And that's what they're going to have to do. That was the whole, I mean, Arthur Smith was coming here to run the football more. And yet they weren't getting the passing. And I don't want to hear it's all because of Julio Jones. Is that an issue? Yes. But not that much. Not if you watch with your eyes and see how poorly Ryan was playing. That to me was just as much Ryan's fault as any other. Offensive line wasn't pass protecting, whatever the case may be, and he has to make a quick rebound. And I don't even know if it's quick enough. I might just dump them all together. Jameis Winston, though, there were two quarterbacks that you knew were going to last in drafts this year that you figured, well, if it was at the right time, I'm going to take a chance on him. Jameis Winston, Deshaun Watson. Well, whoever was able to land Jameis Winston, and that's Nick Rawling in our league, very happy after what happened on Sunday.
Yeah, one of the stranger stat lines that I can remember, really, because you know you got the 4 touchdowns in there, but the yardage not all that prolific. Not that the Saints really needed him to be throwing it all over the place,
but very
but, you know,
Winston-like.
Yeah. I mean, just a kind of a mistake-free game from him. Five touchdowns, no picks. I mean, that whole game was kind of disorienting with how out of sorts Green Bay looked relative to a team in New Orleans that is, again, breaking in a new quarterback after 15 years of Drew Brees. That was unbelievable to watch. I felt like I was just questioning what I was seeing out there. I just could not believe that the Packers looked as out of sorts as they did, and the Saints looked as locked in and ready to roll, despite, you know, no Breeze, no Michael Thomas, any of that. So yeah, that was a very interesting performance, and yeah, Winston now a total viable starter for fantasy.
And again, this is why don't overreact to week 1 matchups. I've seen the Packers; they did it a few years ago where they didn't look good early in the season and had a playoff season. The Patriots, I will always look back at the Patriots' 31-0 loss 15 years ago, whatever, to Buffalo. They won the Super Bowl that year. Mm-hmm. Week 1, sometimes you just don't get off to a good start for whatever reason, no matter what Super Bowl caliber talent you have, you just and maybe a lot of it had to do with, who knows, you know, Green Bay's going to New Orleans, but it's actually being played in Jacksonville. You know, the atmosphere is kind of blah. Throw in the fact that the Saints and the players, and they had to be motivational, you know, motivated, you know, playing for the city and so forth. There's a lot of factors that could have went into what happened in week 1, but I just think it's just, you know, both sides, Green Bay and New Orleans, you got to just calm down. But it's a very positive first step for Jameis Winston at wide receiver. Now, let's talk about some interesting possibilities. You mentioned Judy, and I have Judy in both of my fantasy leagues. So he's out for a while. We had talked about the Hamler, about a really good possibility this year because of how good the preseason was. But last week we were like, but don't forget about Tim Patrick. And sure enough, Patrick comes up already. He had like one touch. He had this touchdown this past week, correct? And yes. Hamler had a drop for a touchdown. Yep. So you got to kind of, you know, now all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe if I have to decide between Hamler and Patrick, I might actually go with Patrick.
It's a tough call.
It is tough.
I very much like both of them. I feel like Tim Patrick is just going to be underrated forever. No matter what he does, I think his pedigree will always have invite the doubters, as it were. But he's just a solid player. He gets the job done. A big guy, so he can obviously get it done in the red zone. They of course have Fant and Albert O as well, so that's a lot to contend with. And of course, Cortland Sutton. But I think Hamler is really interesting because he is different than the rest of them. He is the smaller, speedy guy. He's the guy that can completely lose defenders down the field. Obviously, he did have that ugly drop in the end zone, but I think it's also encouraging that he was able to get that open down the field on a good Giants secondary. So,
absolutely, yes.
I like both of these guys. I think that if you're looking to add a receiver this week, I would probably go Hamler if we're doing conditional bids. I would have Hamler 1 and Patrick 2, but I think it's close, and I would be very happy if I ended up with Patrick this week.
If it was a year to year, I'd probably going Patrick. Dynasty, I'd probably go Hamler, and that's
Fair.
How close it is.
Yes.
As far as other receivers, Pascal with 2 touchdowns. Now, I have Pittman in my fantasy league, and Pascal stole the touchdowns, but it's a week, and that's what's going to happen.
Right.
I'm sure Pittman is going to get his share of touchdowns, but Pascal does this. He'll score 2 touchdowns, and then you don't hear from him again for about 4 or 5 weeks. But then again, Carson Wentz is new, and he'll be looking for his favorite targets, so you got to keep an eye on that. We have no idea if all of a sudden he's a Zach Pascal kind of guy.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that's a great point when it comes to Wentz being in this new offense. Obviously, no T.Y. Hilton. So it was, for DFS this week, it was a lot of people chased Pittman, of course. A lot of people chased Paris Campbell. But yeah, it ended up being Pascal being the one with all the production. If you want to look from the dynasty lens, someone that I have in the Rotowire Staff Dynasty League, at bottom of my roster to be clear, but someone who's interesting, and it's interesting that he got on the field, is Mike Stracken, the rookie,
yes.
From coming over from the FCS level, but has some pretty incredible measurables and testing numbers. I mean, he's 6'5", 226 out of Charleston, 7th-round guy, but obviously played his way onto the roster, and with no T.Y. Hilton, again, he could have a chance here. So he's not someone that you're picking up this week, but he's definitely someone that you should have on your radar as well. But yeah, right now it seems like Pascal's the leader in the clubhouse, but I'm not panicking if I'm a Pittman guy. Only had 1 fewer target than Pascal. Should end up being fine. I think that overall Pittman the more talented player between the two, and he'll start to eat as well.
Now, what do you think about Shepard? For the Giants.
He changed his number to his college number, and he looked a lot faster.
There you go. Sometimes that's all you need.
That's right.
And they also had the other kid from Auburn. What's his name?
Darius
Yes,
Slayton.
And he's a forgotten guy a lot. And I wonder if Slayton was on a team with a more explosive offense, with a big-time quarterback, if he'd be a more dangerous weapon.
Yeah, he has that talent. He really flashed towards the end of his rookie season. I really bought in hard last year, and it just didn't really come to fruition so well. But I think that Slayton is definitely a talented guy. I think that, if you want to examine this entire group of Giants pass catchers, obviously Kenny Golladay is going to be a big factor there. They just paid him a ton of money. Pretty interesting that Kadarius Toney is this far behind right now. I mean, I didn't hate the draft pick as much as a lot of people did. A lot of people panned it right off the bat. I think when you look at the opportunity cost of who they took or who he was selected instead of, maybe you can start to quibble a little bit more. But I don't think anyone could have foreseen him being this much of a non-factor. So he's another guy to have a little bit of concern about, specifically for year one. But I still think that it's far too early to give up on a rookie first round receiver with the type of ball skills and explosiveness that Toney has.
Okay, now at the tight end position, I also wanted to add in a couple of guys, and Gronk. Now, Gronk has this huge game, and you knew that he's going to have a few really good games. In your dynasty league, you don't know how much longer he's going to play. So it's like, okay, if you're going to pick him up, you're picking him up because, hey, especially if you're picking him up for a younger tight end, you're saying, I'm trying to do this because I want to win this year,
Right.
as opposed to thinking of the future. But it's not a bad idea. I mean, he's a year past coming back from the league, retired, didn't have a full offseason like everyone else. Now he's kind of, and let's remember, he's not Tom Brady's age. He's up there in his 30s.
He's a couple months older than Travis Kelce.
Yeah. So I think people think, but I think it's because he's been banged up a lot. That people think, and he's been in so many big games over his career that people just think he's like 40 years old, and he's not that old. So he looked really good. Now again, it's one game, but I think he's going to get picked up a lot this week.
I think he should. He's someone that you know what he is at this point as far as that injury risk, but you also know that if he's active on Sundays, him and Brady, that's a connection that's not going anywhere. Even with the wealth of options that they have in that passing game, Gronk is still going to be that guy, especially in the red zone. So I think that he's a great pickup if he's still out there. I know he's available in ours. If you're churning that tight end spot, definitely in on Gronk right now. But everyone, again, knows that you might not be getting 17 games of Gronk. It might be closer to 10, honestly. We'll see how he holds up. But when he's out there, man, he's still got it.
And then another guy that actually had a good week was David Njoku. And I, as a Jet fan, I think he would be a great addition to an offense that needs a tight end in that system. And I don't think Njoku is going to last much longer in Cleveland. I think he's settled in. He's not complaining anymore. But they've got a lot of tight ends there. They got 3. And I think there would be a team that'll say, we'll give you a contract that Cleveland's not going to give you. And I could see a team looking for a tight end that if he can continue to play like this year, he's got the talent to be that type of guy. And I'm looking for a young tight end in my dynasty league. I'm picking him up.
I like that call. Njoku's still a young guy. He's still just 25. Obviously, the career hasn't gone quite like we would have hoped thus far. But man, he's one of those guys that you just feel like once he unlocks it, he's going to establish himself as a legit tight end in this league. It took guys like Jared Cook a long time to get rolling. Maybe he can have a similar career trajectory to him, and that's something that should definitely be appealing to fantasy managers out there.
And what was it, Juwan Johnson? For
yes,
the
so
Saints. Had 2 touchdowns on 12 snaps.
Yes. So obviously you're not counting on that efficiency. You're not counting on that efficiency from the Saints offense week to week. But it's definitely interesting that with no Michael Thomas there, how they're going to calibrate things. Adam Troutman has more targets. I think that he's more the permanent fixture. But Juwan Johnson, I mean, former 5-star recruit, didn't quite take off the way that many expected at Penn State, had a decent final year at Oregon. Just a big-bodied guy, good athlete. I wouldn't draw the direct Marquez Colston comparison, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that Peyton can envision him in a role like that. But that's about it from me as far as these tight ends this week.
Absolutely, and that's about it for the show. Just taking a look at let's see, running through our league once again. Our standings here. It was Stick of Truth that had the big week.
Chris Benzine.
What's that?
Chris Benzine.
Okay,
yeah.
Yes, Chris. He came up big. And let's see, what was Chris? He's got Kyler Murray had a big week. Let's see, who else was the big? Amari Cooper had a big week too.
Yes, so huge performances from them and Tyreek Hill as well. So he's off to a good start. Some of the other guys on the roster maybe underperformed relative to expectations. Your Deontay Johnsons, your Justin Jeffersons, but I think everywhere else he's got to be pretty happy with how things went week 1.
And Jim is not too happy this week.
Unlikely to be happy. I still think he has a very good roster though.
And he's got some injury concerns I can see here. He's got Fitzpatrick already on IR. He's got Gibson, Ayuk, and Higgins banged up. So We'll have to keep an eye on that. All right, so that'll wrap it up. A lot to cover here, and that's what we're going to be doing every week here as we get through each week all the way through to the playoffs. So thanks a lot, as always, John. And once again, it's is it rotowire.com/betting? That's how you get to the betting section on the website. That'll get you to the betting section. If you want a free trial, go to rotowire.com/try. That'll get you there. A no strings attached 10-day free trial to kind of poke around, see what the website has to offer. And then again, of course, rotowire.com/betting. Excellent, John. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you very much, Greg.